Hi everyone, welcome to the Safe Table podcast. I'm Tania, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Hermi. She has her company called the Food QA based in United States, and she is a consultant who is helping US food companies in their FSVP program, their FDA supplier approval programs, and so many other things that we need similar to Canada. So let's chat with Hermi, and this is one of the very special episodes for me because this is the last episode of season one. Yes, we are going to end the podcast season one here. I'm still thinking more ideas, something new. And if you have any ideas, you can definitely leave a comment and on this video and we'll go from there. And if I like something, then maybe season two can be all about that. Hi Hermi, welcome to the Safe Table podcast. First of all, thank you so much for accepting my invite to be on the show. And you're one of the very special guests to me because we connected through LinkedIn. We are doing something similar in the industry, but in different countries. And when we connected with each other, it's a click. There's a click something. You can talk with this person about anything. So that's why I wanted to invite you in this podcast. And this is my last episode of the season one. So thank you so much for accepting the invite. Uh, I wanted to introduce yourself a little bit. Like, tell me about what do you do day to day and how are you helping uh, food industry in States?
Yes. So I run the Food QA and we help CPG food brands basically get through the hurdles of compliance and food safety and quality so that they can focus on scaling and growing. So that's our focus.
That's amazing. So, Hermi, I want to know there are so many things when we're working on FDA program, even in CFI, right? We're doing CFI in Canada, it's CFI, Canadian Food Inspection Agency. In States, it's FDA, Food and
Yes.
Drug Administration. Most of the time, I think the goal is same, food safety. With most of the regulations, the requirements are same too. Just little bit I have seen about the supplier approval program or the import requirements, right? So from FDA perspectives, what are the must-have for the strong supplier approval program?
So the supplier approval program is part of FDA's supply chain program. So the FDA always requires kind of the bare minimum of what companies should have and should do. So all they require is a documented and maintained list of approved suppliers. Now, the definition of maintained can vary, and so it depends on your risk. So FDA likes to look at everything from a risk-based lens. So basically, if you look at the risk of the supplier, the risk of the material you're getting from them, the risk the supplier presents itself, and then the activities of the supplier, then you can decide what is needed for each supplier in order to approve them, and then you have to maintain them on an ongoing basis. Basically, what the FDA wants to see is that your program is effective, and you need to answer the question, why do you trust this supplier? So if you feel like you can justify that, then your supplier approval program will work.
So is there a list that FDA provides that these are the documents mandatory, like in CFI, or we go with any GFSI audits, right? Okay, you have to have product specification, third party audit certificate, or you can even audit your supplier, visit their facility if you can, depending upon if the business have enough resources, enough people, enough money, all of those things in place. So when we talk about from FDA perspective, do they provide any list to the food companies? Okay, go on this regulation here, this is the list you need to, and supply, and your customer can just copy paste, or even you can give it to your customer, hey, these are the documents, just email them and get those done. So is there a list of documents?
FDA doesn't like to provide these things, mostly because it could vary depending on what the company is doing itself once it has those materials in-house, as well as, like I said, the risk of the materials and how the materials are handled at that supplier. So it's all going to kind of vary. There are kind of industry best practices or things that most companies do, and these are third-party audits. So it could be GFSI, HACCP, SQF. And then there are documents that you need to get. Make sure that they have all of their food safety programs in order. Ideally, you have their HACCP as well of the materials that they're providing to you. And then records that they are monitoring all of the risks in their facility, as well as information obviously about the materials you're getting. So that could be specification sheets, COAs, test results.
Right. So, Hermi, how do you deal with it? Okay, I'll tell you what happens here with me. A lot of times this has happened. So, I want to know what is your take on it. They don't know what documents we need from supplier approval program. I give them the list. Okay, get these. At least we need to have 3 to 4 to do our supplier risk assessment and to decide what category they fall into and if we are approving that supplier or not.
Yes.
Lot of time they don't get those documents from them, and they are even, and sometimes there are very small businesses, they're buying from like grocery stores directly, taking from the shelf and using it in the products. So how do you deal with something like that when they're not there? Do you recommend them changing the supplier at all, or is there any other way to verify your supplier if you're not getting enough documents from them?
Yes, there's lots of different ways these can be done. So, so if you're not able to get certain documents and it's a larger supplier, then I would recommend definitely an on-site audit. Now, there are other reasons you would do that, but this is definitely one of them. So going there and actually seeing their process, their facilities, are they doing what you would expect them to do? And would you trust product from this facility or from this company?
A lot of time, even like my customers, they would come back to me, hey Tanya, they're not giving me the documents, so what should I do? And I'm buying from them from years, we never had issue, there is no recall, no customer complaint. But I always tell them it's not about friendship, it was
Yeah.
product risk assessment, right? And even we read it everywhere, there's food fraud, so many things are going on. I don't know if you're buying from distributor, they are importing from another country, packing in their brand and just selling it to you, correct? So if you don't have enough documents, if a customer don't have enough documents, how do you deal with it? If they're like, okay, no, I want to keep the same supplier, I don't care.
Yeah, so if you want to definitely stick with that supplier, it's important to understand the risks that you're facing due to that decision. So if for some reason there is, cross-contamination or adulteration, or you get something that you were not expecting, then you almost don't have a defensible argument of why your food product then can be safe. So that could leave you subject to recalls or regulatory action, or probably the worst is consumers getting sick. So you definitely don't want that. So an on-site audit is one option. Another option is, a lot of times suppliers don't want to send the documents, but if you go to their facility, they will let you read them. They will show everything that you need on site. So make that trip if you can. It's very important. And if you can't, and if the supplier is just flat out refusing to give you anything, that is a really good time to search for alternatives, because if you can't trust the ingredients that you're bringing in, then why would you then bring that to your consumers?
Exactly. I agree with you. I think any person who is processing, they are responsible for their product. If you have FDA or CFI coming to your facility, you cannot tell them, or even consumer is getting sick, my sugar processor did not provide me the documents. Maybe that's why. Okay, but you knew about it, so you should have done something about it, right? So you cannot put it on other people. It's always your responsibility as a processor.
Yes.
I love and I agree what you were saying.
Yes, even if you're a brand and you're not processing anything, you're simply bringing stuff in and then selling them out in the marketplace, you're still responsible for that product.
So how does FDA's Supplier Verification Program shape the way US companies vet for their international suppliers? So, FDA have their own requirements, right? When you import something to states. So how does that help, or how does that vet US companies through international suppliers?
So there is something called the FSVP, Foreign Supplier Verification Program. So this is if you bring in product from abroad into the US, and there are additional requirements for this activity. You would have to, it might be harder to do an on-site audit, obviously, if you're on the other side of the world. So there is additional, so when you're bringing product in from abroad into the US, there is more of a focus on this because we want to make sure that whatever's coming into the US meets the US regulations and the requirements of products that are processed in the US. So the Foreign Supplier Verification Program has been established for almost a decade now, and believe it or not, there are still a lot of companies who don't have an FSVP as part of their program. So it's very important for everybody to get on board because the FDA does check and they pull your product for testing. It could highlight that issue and it could come back to you, and there are all sorts of repercussions from that, from losing time, your product kind of staying at the port, and then obviously regulatory action as well. So you really want to be on top of that.
So FSVP program is not only for companies who are importing raw materials or packaging into states, it's also for the companies who are, how to say it? Okay, so if I'm a Canadian manufacturer, I'm processing, let's say here, probiotic soda, and I want to sell it to states. So I should be meeting FSVP requirements, right?
So the FSVP requirement is actually for the importer who is in the
Not for
US.
export. I see. Okay. But they will be asking me for the information. You know what I
Correct,
mean?
yes.
Yeah.
However, let's keep in mind that Australia, Canada, I think New Zealand, I forget the list, but a few companies have equivalent, they've been established that their programs are equivalent to US requirements. So for those importing from those countries, there are fewer requirements, unless of course there are extra hazards present, depending on the material and the supplier.
So in Canada, we have import PCP plan, preventive control plan. So anything we import into Canada, it's the company who is importing into Canada. They are responsible for for their suppliers, from where they're getting the product from. So they're responsible. They should have the program of how to identify all the hazards, like risk assessments, and then
Yes.
traceability, all of those things that comes with it.
Yes,
Yeah.
so that's not to say that if a US company is importing from Canada, that's not to say they don't do anything. They just
Yeah.
import it and everything is fine. You still need to verify that they are a trusted supplier and justify your reason for believing that.
So, what kind of documentation does FDA expect from the companies under FSVP program?
So again, it's a risk-based approach, but generally it's very similar to the domestic supplier approval program. So you definitely want to know the process that the product goes through. Ideally, know ingredients, ingredient COAs, all of the hazards associated with those. They have some sort of third-party audit, GFSI or equivalent, and then you want to make sure that you're monitoring their their records. So if there are, for example, CCPs as part of their process, you need to verify that those are taking place, because it's not like you can always go there. You kind of to make a weekly trip to Asia. So it's important to have a really good communication and a good relationship with your suppliers, particularly if they're out of the country. So I've seen things like, they change the supplier, they change the type of pepper, they change the supplier of the ingredient, they change a part of the process, especially if there are temperature changes or anything like that. You really want to be aware. And if you have a good relationship with your suppliers, then the assumption is that they will communicate these things to you.
Exactly. Something came into my mind when you were talking about all of the risk assessments. I used to have a client in the very beginning of my consulting journey. I can't name the company. They were making product in China and they were importing into Canada and selling into USA as well. So basically, they had one company in Canada and one company in USA, so importing in both of the countries. One time, FDA stopped the product and on the border, they tested it, and there was this color that was banned in the product that was not supposed to be there, and my client didn't know about it. Even I didn't know. I didn't know that. So when they tested it, only then we came to know about that. So you know how we do lab, even when you're importing the products, you're supposed to do the lab testing. I'm sure it would be under FDA as well to do some lab test, because that's how you, that will be also part of your risk assessment, right? To actually test the product, or you actually test the ingredient, right? So when we tested in Canada, we only tested for pathogens. Very honestly, we did not test it for any chemical hazards or anything. And
Mm-hmm.
even CFI, I think they only tested it for pathogens only. But when FDA stopped at the border, they did not test it for pathogens, they tested it for the ingredients. If these are the actual ingredients, they're saying on the label that matches with the ingredients itself. But one of the ingredients was not correct. And it literally put that company in a huge financial loss. And then
That
after that, it was so bad. And it was a startup company. They were relying on the people and she said, Tanya, I couldn't even travel to China because it was peak COVID at that time. She couldn't, she was only doing virtual calls. Even I have seen their facility virtually. So they showed me everything step by step. This is how we do it, this is how we do it. But it
mm-hmm.
did not, I don't know, everybody missed it, or you don't even think about that they can put something else in the product just to
Yeah,
make the better quality of it and
yeah.
not declare it to anyone. So this is why I think this is why you're saying supply risk assessment, do the testing. It's so important, because if you don't know, you just cannot rely on the paperwork. Anybody can add it, and especially now with AI, Chat GPT, you can do anything. Literally, you can
Yeah.
just put same company name report. You can literally create your own lab report and
Yeah.
send it to
So
them.
as part of my supplier approval programs or FSVPs, I
Yeah,
highly recommend, if possible, to get ingredient specification sheets
yeah.
to really get into, any possible sub-ingredients that may be hiding in there. And then, like you said, however, they can mess with those documents and kind of just cross it out. So it's also important in the hazard analysis portion of it, or when you're going through the HACCP, to look at these ingredients and do a little bit of research to see what are the common risks associated. So that might be going through the FDA's resources, and as well as going through just news articles and just historical information on specific products or ingredients to see what are the risks that have come up in the past.
So, is there any special person in the food facility who is responsible to evaluate the suppliers? Is it like QA, or that person has to be HACCP or PCQI certified?
Mm-hmm.
This is something I always wanted to know. Is HACCP equivalent to PCQI in states?
So HACCP is basically the foundation.
Yeah.
So, that's a fundamental requirement. It's ideal to have somebody who has HACCP certification in your facility. If you're a manufacturing facility, some brands who don't self-manufacture don't have that. So HACCP is very foundational. It basically means that you can perform the HACCP process and be responsible for any CCPs that might come up. And then PCQI is a step above, and so you'll be responsible for the comprehensive food safety plan, which could include HACCP.
Okay, wow. Okay. So basically, HACCP is mostly more focused on raw material, ingredients, finished product.
And
So
the process.
PCQI is on the process floor, yes, and PCQI is more on your facility, environment, people, those two.
And
I think that's
overall,
what we have here. We call it a prerequisite program under SPI. So basically, you cover their premises, receiving, shipping, storage, pest control, traceability, allergens, additives, like all of those stuff. I
everything.
think that is what PCQI.
Yes, and there's also a requirement of experience too. So it's not
Yeah,
just you get the certificate; you need to have
right.
some experience in the
Yeah,
field as
yeah.
well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now I'm sure, because now I understood the difference, because whenever we get documents, I'm like, this is the same document. What is the difference? But now I understand, because we have here prerequisite program. So prerequisite is equal to PCQI, and okay, thank you. Okay, so how often does company in states have to reevaluate their suppliers? And is there anything that triggers them to reevaluate again? So how does that work?
So the only requirement that's explicitly stated is that it has to be done before you use that ingredient or product.
Okay.
So before you import it, you have to have the FSVP done. Before you use the product, you need to approve that supplier. Of course, there are going to be emergency situations, which there are ways around that. However, on a normal basis, a normal process, you would have to have it done before you actually use the items that you're receiving. So, like with most things we're talking about today, it depends on the risk. So, what hazards does the material have, the suppliers, as well as the supplier performance. So, it's important to reevaluate your suppliers. I would say every 2 years or so, but again, it depends on their performance and your historical information. So if you have a supplier who makes changes to the process or the ingredients without letting you know, risk goes up. And that means frequency is shorter. I always suggest starting out with shorter frequencies, particularly if you don't have a long-standing relationship with a supplier, because there are many things that you could find out over the course of these reevaluations that will be very helpful. So it's important to look at not just their third-party audits, but also the corrective actions of their third-party audits. That's something that a lot of people skip or just forget about. Yeah. Because it's easy to say, look, they passed the audit with flying colors, but there were some non-conformances. Have those corrective actions been completed in a satisfactory manner and in a timely manner? So that's really important. As well as, if there have been issues with the items that you're receiving from them. So customer complaints, have there been foreign materials found in what you're receiving from them? When you ask them for documentation, do they give you the runaround for a month or two? So these are all things that we have to take into consideration. And again, we have to answer the question, do we trust the supplier? Here is why.
So my understanding is in USA, under FDA, I should say, there is no frequency designated. Like, no, you have to do every year, every 2 years. Like in Canada, under CFI, once a year is the requirement. Even if it's the same supplier, you're using it from 100 years, you have to evaluate that same supplier every year minimum. And then whenever, if there is any, as you said, supplier risk assessment, if there is any risk, you had any customer complaints with the same company you had any recall, or if you feel of your supplier have changed any of the product specifications, then of course you have to reevaluate. But we have a requirement of doing it at least once a year, even if it's the same supplier, nothing changes, no recall and no customer complaint.
Yeah, so the FDA says if they're not a qualified supplier, every 2 years. So that's what I recommend. It could be done more frequently, which I prefer to start out with and then kind of expand it over time.
Yeah, as
you brought up a really good point as far as regulatory changes. Yeah. So sometimes there are changes in regulation requirements where it happens when we're not yet going to reevaluate our supplier. So we don't know technically whether or not they're meeting these new requirements. So that's why it's important to constantly reevaluate and keep that relationship open.
Exactly. No, I think it's very, very important because, and one thing you mentioned earlier, people even change a little bit of a black pepper in the ingredient too. What they're selling you, that can impact too. You don't know where they're buying from. You don't know what quantity now they're adding in. And especially if any of your ingredients or product contains specifically any food additives, preservatives that are required to be in specified quantity, that impacts a lot too. So I think it's, as you said, it's super, super important to do the risk assessments. And that's what we see a lot of time missing. So that's why that is my next question. So what are the most common compliance gaps you have seen as a consultant during your supplier audits? Any red flags you want to talk about?
So the thing that happens most often is that reality doesn't match what's on the paper. So they send you some beautiful SOPs and process flow charts, and then you go there and you see none of that is happening, and the employees have never seen that SOP before. So I always recommend doing an on-site audit if possible, at least once in the beginning so that you can confidently say that they are doing what they say they are doing and what they're supposed to be doing. Another one is, like I mentioned, not following up on corrective actions. So, for example, they show you a CAPA for an incident that occurred. There was some deviation and they had to address it, but they don't tell you how they addressed it, when they addressed it, was it even addressed? And they kind of just tell you about the issue and then don't follow up on it. And same goes for non-conformances, whether that's for their internal audits, for third-party audits. For your own visit, you might have something that you want them to change, and they say they'll do it, but then you never hear about it again. So it's important to always do that follow-up and kind of close the loop.
I like the corrective action part a lot. I think that is something maybe I should be looking into more for my customers too, because a lot of time we get the report and like, okay, they passed the score. And I think industry too, like food companies too, they are not, they're like, oh, they gave us a certificate and that's it. It means they passed. So everybody is relying on someone. Nobody wants to take the charge and like, okay, no, I'm going to go into depth of this and I'm going to look into it, what's going on, and if they are actually doing it.
Yes, yes.
I believe it's,
Another thing would be, like we mentioned about trusting your supplier
yeah.
and not waiting forever for documents. That would be another red flag. So if they're
Okay.
giving you the runaround,
Yeah,
I would look into it a lot more deeply.
I agree. I agree. And that's why I wanted to ask you. So, you know how this tariffs and trades, all of this situation
Hmm.
have gone. So, has that impacted, do you think that has impacted a lot for like food fraud and supplier approval programs, anything in the companies? Because even early, I had this personal incident I'm going to share with you. So, one of my clients, they import seafood.
Hmm.
And when I asked them that, okay, they were, I mean, they're planning to import the seafood. And he said that, okay, Tanya, what documents do I need? So I gave him list, blah, 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 get these from your supplier, and then we are good to go. We have no
Hmm.
issues. You won't have any issues on the border. You won't have any issues with when you have any your regulatory audit. So we'll be good.
Yeah.
He reached out to his supplier. Supplier said, I'm already paying so many tariffs. If you want all of these documents, you have to pay me this much.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. I'm like, if you're a food processor, you should have these on file anyways. You shouldn't be charging people just on the sake of documents. And even if tariffs are there, tariffs are not there, their number is going up, low, we don't care.
Yeah.
You are processing something, you're giving a food for someone to consume. You should have those documents, and that should be something you should have initially discussed and not making a part of it. Food safety, just because now there are tariffs, so I'm going to charge you more if you want
Yes.
to get these documents from me. So he said, okay, I'm not going to take product from you.
Yeah.
So I want to know, have you seen anything similar like that in States, or how your clients are managing, how companies are managing this in USA?
Yeah. So whenever barriers go up, like tariffs, um, companies are going to feel that pressure to pass on the cost. Luckily, I haven't seen that personally, but I've seen them cut corners to kind of recoup some of that loss, right? So unfortunately, these things can lead to mislabeling, substitution with cheaper ingredients, and then they can also try to subvert and go through a different country. So then you have false country of origin claims on your product. So the tariffs don't just affect the cost, they can also affect the quality of the food, the compliance, the food safety. So yeah, anytime these barriers go up, there will be corners cut, unfortunately. And we have to be on the lookout for that. We just have to have a heightened sense of looking out for these things.
Exactly. And one of these days, you see companies say, okay, they're paying for organic and they're not organic.
Oh yeah.
What ingredients would say organic, then like they would claim made in this country, as you said, they will put all these claims. But the thing is, how do you even like how do you even just look into for all these claims? You're putting organic, non-GMO, certified B Corporation, like all of these fancy claims, everything is there. And then your customer is paying huge amount because they want to buy a good ingredient to use in
Yeah.
their product. because this is what their product relies on, right?
Yep.
That we are organic and we are buying everything organic. We are buying high quality, expensive ingredients, and we are giving you the same.
Hmm.
It's so hard to just to like obviously go through each and every organic, kosher, halal, and prove that okay, these are the actually claims that they are true to it. They're not just
Yeah.
putting this out on a label sticker. You cannot, and especially with tariffs and trades, you're right. They are not. It's not only about the money. I think it's the more focus is on the quality, and I think companies are losing that somewhere. They are making compromises, and if this goes long, it's gonna go bad. That they're going to be more of food safety frauds too, not only just. Have you heard of this pistachio thing going around? After that Dubai chocolate got viral, there are in Canada, there are so many recalls on salmonella for pistachios. Why? Because Dubai chocolate was with pistachio and it went viral. Now there's shortage of pistachios worldwide, and people who had stored old pistachios in their warehouses who were like
Hmm.
almost expired, moldy, they treated with some chemicals, put it in new best before date, and started selling people to people. And CFI did so many recalls on those pistachios in Canada. Like I am surprised to see just whenever there is some shortage or tariffs or something like this happen, first thing that comes in people's mind is just to play with people's health, like food safety. They just don't literally they don't care about it.
Yes.
Everybody just cares about money.
Yes. And it could lead to so much
Yeah.
adulteration that, we've all heard of adulteration. And we heard of the major issue, which was, I think it was peanut dust that they had put into cumin, I believe. And not only is that adulteration, but you're introducing an undeclared allergen, which is a huge food safety risk. And, you know, besides the recall, you have the regulatory liability as well as your consumers. And your reputation is gone. So, one thing that's kind of stuck with me over the years is the quote, trust but verify. So, you do all the work where you go through your supplier approval process to approve these suppliers, but you need to also verify the information. So, if you see these claims on the packaging, check the specification sheet. Is it also there? And if it's there, can they provide you the certificates? So, if they're claiming halal, and
Organic, non-GM, anything.
if they're claiming halal, organic, and all these other things, can
Yeah.
they provide you the certificates? And then you could take it, the next step is look up their certificate number. You can also call the certifying bodies to verify their certificate. So there are other steps you can take. And in this day and age, we definitely have to take those steps.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So how is this the way that US companies are dealing with the food fraud right now? Do people like QA or people who are PCQI certified who are responsible to approve the suppliers, are they actually taking those next steps that you're referring to make sure that there are no food fraud risks?
Well, it's always easier for companies with more resources. The larger companies, the more established companies, it's a
Yeah.
lot harder for the smaller ones. But so most of those more established companies have food fraud programs in place as part of their food safety plan. So I've seen it, I've built it, and they're not opposed to it. It's just hard to get the time to do it. You need to have the resources, you need to have the right people who know what to look for. So these food fraud programs include a vulnerability assessment, which a lot of people might not know how to do that if they haven't done it before. They haven't even heard of it a lot of times. At risk prevention and mitigation strategies and processes, managing this program, training everybody, and then of course the record keeping. So yeah, a lot of companies do have these food fraud programs in place, but it does take resources for sure.
And do you think there are so many softwares now, like especially with, I think
Yes.
there were always softwares, but now with AI, there are more things coming in the market. I see day to day, something is always coming up, right? So do you
Yeah.
think these softwares can help industry or are helping industry and industry is ready to opt these? Because earlier they were just for inventory management or
Yes.
traceability. Now we are seeing a lot for supplier approval programs. We are seeing for QA records, right? For all of these digital world is moving from paper to digital world, even the food safety world. So do you think to identify these food fraud or even for the supplier approval program, companies are ready to spend money on the softwares, on the different softwares?
Well, you said the key word there, spend money. So I think if they can afford it, they want it. They're open to it. They want to use it because it makes their job easier. The software now is not just kind of like a checklist that you check off, or even you upload the documents and you know where to find them. They are more sophisticated where they will send you, they will flag if something is expired, if something is missing, and then they can also be integrated to reach out to your suppliers. If you're missing some documentation from your supplier or it's expired, they will send an email automatically, request the document, and then it'll be uploaded and you'll have it, you'll be compliant. So they do make life easier, but they do cost money, and not just to have the subscription or the software, but also to manage it and learn it. That also takes resources. So I would say medium to large companies will definitely be using them. Smaller companies still rely a lot on that manual. It doesn't necessarily have to be paper, because I mean, who's faxing things anymore?
You're right.
But in the emails, oh, it's in my email, and then you have to kind of search for it and find it. And if you need it, and the person whose email is out of the office, then you're gonna have to wait till they come back. So it makes things a little difficult. One thing to call out that's important is to have redundancy in these systems. So even if you have a great software program, make sure you have the information that's in that software also somewhere else. So it could be in your own servers or your computer. It could be, you might print it out and put it in a file in case there's a power outage or you can't access it for some reason. So it's important to have things in two places. I need to call out. So it's important to have things in two places. I do need to bring up the fact that this can cause issues. So if let's say you have your COAs all in a software, and then you also have copies of them saved in your computer's drive. You get a new one with a lot of changes. You have to remember to update it in both places. If you have a software that has a way for you to just automatically download every so often, that's ideal, because it automatically saves any changes in a second place. So that's what I would recommend.
That's a very good insight, actually. So, is there any software, Hermi, that you recommend to your clients for supplier approval program? Do you have any that do you want to share anything with the audience about, okay, this is a software used a lot in US, or I also recommend, or you have used it personally, or your clients uses it?
Well, a lot of companies who sell to these big retailers, the retailers have their own requirements of where documents need to be uploaded. So as far as your products documents, a lot of companies rely on those websites. I can't say I recommend anything specific for your internal documents. There are so many out there, and so many are coming up. I mean, you just see one after the other with all sorts of AI integrations now, and they could do some amazing things. At this point, I can't recommend one over the other, but there are some really, really good ones out there for sure.
Okay, nice. Thank you. So, one last question. I
Okay.
want to know, looking ahead, how do you see FDA supplier approval program or even FSVP program? What changes are you expecting, or you think that these are the changes we need to have as a consultant, as your experience in the industry in coming 5 to 10 years, that will support US companies, that will support consumers, that support less food recalls, less customer complaint, less foodborne illnesses, more people safety, because that's what our goal is, right?
Oh, you want it all, don't you? So I think I think those are basic requirements, but yes, I want all of those things too. I think the one thing we've learned is that we can't predict anything. So we have to expect the unexpected these days. And so whether that's tariffs, supply chain disruptions due to, a pandemic, or a ship getting stuck in a canal, or global crises, regulatory overhauls. So it's really hard to kind of predict these things, but I think the FDA will continue to focus on risk-based approaches for everything. Transparency is going to be huge. Consumers are requiring that from companies, and traceability is going to be so important. I know the traceability rule was, again, I hope once we establish it's going to change the game for traceability. So just being on top of your suppliers, making sure that you're checking for everything, every potential risk you see, and looking at everything through a risk-based lens is going to continue to be important.
Wow, interesting. Thank you. Anything you want to add at the end? I really enjoyed this. I think this conversation was really insightful. People are going to enjoy it.
Yes, so I love talking about this stuff. So I enjoyed it as well, and thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this conversation between me and Hermi and how we compare the regulations of CFI and FDA. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot today from this episode, and I hope you would find it insightful as well. If you like this episode, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs it, and especially the food companies. I think they still need to know more, have more information about how they can approve their suppliers. So, as I said, this is the last episode of season one. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'll see you in season two. Until then, bon appetit.